show, where I have a fireside chat with handpicked leaders and select leaders from the payments industry. Now, they share their view on how to lead their teams in a human way and achieve significant tasks, however, via people. They also share how they embrace opportunity first before then they look at the challenges. As we know, one of the greatest challenges in the payments industry is how to build a culture that enables people to realize their potential whilst realizing high performance for the company. Now, one of the most accomplished people I've seen firsthand at this is Joe Shinners. Joe, welcome aboard. Welcome today. Sorry.
Thank you, Adrian. Thrilled to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Joe is a VP at American Express, and our relationship goes back over a year or so now, and I was always impressed with the way you led every project from a human perspective first. Let's get the people right before also then marrying it with the teams. And he's definitely also one of the most curious people I know, and always has a very interesting perspective, always questioning for deeper meaning to unlock value for customers and team. So really thrilled that we've got a different perspective today. He's an exceptional, authentic leader and also a thoroughly decent human being. So thank you, Joel. I know your schedule's been beyond busy over the last couple of months. So thank you for taking the time out. Really appreciate it.
I'm glad anytime the diary includes a chance to connect with you, Adrian. So thrilled to be here again.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. Me too. So I wonder if we could just sort of start with, perhaps you could share some of the choices that you've made within your career.
Oh, that's a fun one. I've been doing a ton of interviewing, and so I've heard lots of candidates give me answers to that exact same question, and it's always interesting, the choices and how far back people go. I think my my early career and influence and direction was, as most of us, I would say, comes back to some of the choices growing up very early. I had a fairly entrepreneurial father, went into business doing it for himself, broke away from an accounting firm, real strong Midwestern type of values in the US. So get a job, support the family. All that story was fairly well ingrained in my upbringing. So I went for a business degree in university, and I guess even from the early time, you mentioned, my curiosity has jumped out. I went into a consulting role at Deloitte to start off, mostly because I was so indecisive about who to work for that consulting felt brilliant because I wouldn't have to really make that decision. And so I get a sample of everything. It was like, and so indecision as much as anything led to some interesting choices as I've tried to explore what was really for me. Quickly, as many who've had some consulting experience know, it's the jumping around between clients is exciting and intense for learning, but I like to see something follow through. And so I left within a couple of years, moved to American Express with an aspiration of staying for a year or two, learning and moving somewhere else. It has now been 17 years, an immense number of changes in roles, in advancing with the company. And so all of those, I don't think I've sacrificed my own desire to be challenged and to continue to grow at all throughout that. It just has been, I call it symbiotic, that my own personal desire for professional growth and American Express having a fairly robust, global footprint and culture and set of businesses has given me that opportunity to continue to grow while staying within one big umbrella of a company. And so that's the broad strokes. I landed in product development about 15 years ago, so fairly early on, and as I jumped into Amex, and then I've been largely on the issuing side of the business. So in commercial, the commercial side, so looking at our corporate products and the digital solutions around expense management as well, and then had some spin helping to consult with some of the issuers for the network. Similar functions, so looking at how do we get corporate products out there into commercial businesses. And then I pivoted to the B2C space and came into the loyalty and benefits side of American Express. So I had a good stint doing strategy on how do we think about things like pay with points as a motivator for customer engagement, attraction, and retention. And then have really spanned a pretty extensive depth of my career in loyalty. And about 8 months ago, I was, I wouldn't say bored, but significantly looking to really up the level of challenge in my own life. And so I moved into what I'm now looking after, which is the apply for a card experience across our international businesses, which is essentially every country outside of the US.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty broad remit then in terms of geography.
Yes. Japan, either late nights or early mornings in Australia, all the way out to Canada, Mexico. So yes, it's a very globally dispersed footprint for sure. Yeah. Okay. So part of what makes it enriching and exciting too is being able to work across a very broad set of cultures and in markets where the norms are very, very different, and the regulatory environment is also very different. So again, a fruitful tree for learning all the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure we're going to come back to curiosity and your approach to those different markets. I'm sure that's going to feature, but I wonder if we could just, recently when we met up together a few months ago, you said to me that you challenged yourself and your team to take confirmation bias out of creating customer-centric products. Can you share more about that? So that was fascinating.
Yeah, I don't. One of my hobbies, which I don't know, may underpin and give some perspective for the audience too. I listen and absorb a ton on psychology. That's what I moonlight for in books, podcasts. Outside of work, and it's interesting as a leader, as a parent. I've got some small children as well that factor into the whole equation. But I think as I think about things like confirmation bias, and this is where the psychology comes in, and being able to challenge a narrative or an understanding. I have found the role in product in particular is well suited to this, but in a large organization, it's pretty easy to go with the flow. Like everybody has ideas, everybody has solutions. The higher up in the organization you go, you've got a lot of experience, a lot of authority and weight, gravitas. Whether that's through authority or just indirectly through strength of character, and so it's really easy to get caught up in some of that. And I think the mindset I try to bring into the product team in particular is why. The 5 whys kind of a model, but in general is why is this particular idea interesting, and start to go deep into unpacking that. I find it is very easy to have a glance at a problem and jump into solutions very quick.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think my focus in guiding the team is always to try and peel back underneath any solutions that we get asked to go deliver, and really go into what are we trying to accomplish. What's the business opportunity or the challenge that we're confronted with, and how did we make the leap to a particular solution? And so I find that the exercise of doing that almost always unveils for either insights to validate that we're going in the right direction, or that there are gaps. And I guess I love finding those gaps. It's where I feel like I can add a lot of value and opportunity to make the solution better. And so if you do that in a highly collaborative, inquisitive way, it can tend not to rub people the wrong way, no matter how
Okay.
senior
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are, right? You know, if somebody comes and says, "I want you to go deliver this," and say, it can be, it's one way to say no, but there's another way to engage with them in a constructive way to understand where they're coming from and the context behind it. And so I think if you manage the relationship through that
Okay.
experience, while trying to go deep into what's the root driving
Mhm.
the particular direction, it provides
Yeah.
a lot of opportunity to then change direction,
Okay.
provide insight, or you uncover that there's gaps that you need to then go do research on to investigate how to solve it. So that's more the mental, framework and approach that I apply and continually encourage the team to do, and look at tools and techniques and ways to help add a little bit of structure for those learning, without necessarily dictating too much how people go about
Okay.
probing and driving in deep.
Well, just go in deep. Can I just, because it's fascinating,
Yeah.
because obviously within the payment space and within large corporate as well, the strong desire to do and to look also like one is doing is prevailing. Yeah. The course for action in this culture is really important. Perhaps you just give us a little, perhaps you, I don't know if you've got an example of there where you've gone, actually, I don't want you going all the way in. It is worth us taking a bit of a step back, because we'll actually, do you have a practical example of where that's been the case?
So I think about my current role, right? So it is all about the application journey. How do we get that customer who is already expressed an interest in American Express? We're here in the UK. It could be a British Airways Avios product or our Platinum product. So they're interested. We then look after how do we then take that interest and convert it into a completed application? And fairly simple objective. I think about that role is largely friction, right? If somebody's got an interest, some of it's necessary friction, right? We operate in a very highly regulated space.
Sure.
Each market has its own set of rules. For us in particular, things like KYC and KYB, paramount. We're also issuing credits, and so we need to make sure we understand enough about who an individual is and their source of income to figure out how much we want to underwrite. So once we figure that out, like my team's job, and like so many of my partners are sitting there with lots of ideas about how do we make it better. So that's the context. And one of I'm trying to think of how to frame up the current example without sharing too much. One solution that one of my partners has for a market we're working through right now has come and said, we have a very specific solution that solves the problem of getting more customers to start that application experience. This is how we want to go about it. We know this is going to work. Super confident in this approach, and so I've sat down with the partner and gotten my team engaged, and we started then doing the probing that I've encouraged, which is why this solution, why is this particular problem an issue? What insight do we have from customer research that tells us that the customer makes it so far into the journey and doesn't go any further? So we've probed into some of the depth there, and it's quickly unveiled a disconnect in terms of how my team and I are thinking about what would be an appropriate solution from what is being thought of. And so what we've then done is we've set up a series of workshops, and actually I follow a big fan of a Sprint book by Jacob Navin, and is all about the methodology of how do we quickly decompose problem solutions and quickly get to a prototyping and actual customer insight and learning to get something to market. And so we're essentially walking back to go through a very quick sprint, a design sprint, to understand the problem, pull in key insights that we have from the various different partners. Compliance is one element of it. The data and insights team, who can tell us about it, research, who can tell us about the market and customer attitudes and sentiment. And so we're setting this structure up to help bring in key insights into how we're going to go defining what the right solution is, and why we have such different, I frame it as a hypothesis, why we have very different hypotheses on what solution will best address this. And so this design sprint we've set up as a way of helping to drive that collaboration and partnership and get over this very different point of view, try and fuel early insight from customers that say that we're going in the right direction, and use that insight to then help shape and decide whether we invest further and continue down a path in getting a solution right. So I believe that gives you a sense of like a structured approach to how we think about it, and some of the techniques we tend to try and use when we've got really big disagreements on questions and feel like we need to invest the time into making sure we get the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. And I think it's and I suppose it's one of the things that naturally leads me to. I know you're committed to lead with curiosity, and you're always looking for learning opportunities, both for yourself and your team and the organization. Can you tell us where that comes from, and also what the connection between curiosity, hiring, and onboarding is? Because obviously that seems to be very topical for you at the moment.
Yeah. I think there are two traits that I look for. So curiosity is one, for sure. So I think the question, like, how does, and coming back to your question, so for recruiting, onboarding, and overall curiosity, how does curiosity fit within those parts of my role? And how do I stay curious? I think that was as well. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of the roots of this. Because I think for me, I think my mind comes into some expressions, some cliches that I really struggle with. One is fake it till you make it. Like, I've heard this thing for ages, as a means of I don't know, building confidence that you're the right person for a job, and it never resonated with me. It's never, at least the style has not worked well with me. And so I have found that being transparent about what I know and don't know, what skills I have, what I don't have, and then doing everything I can to build those. And that's where the curiosity comes in, is understanding what I'm missing, has helped me in my own career far more than fake it till you make it. Like, I don't put on any airs. I don't give it. I attempt to be very authentic in virtually every interaction. And I was even having an interaction with a colleague yesterday, and this whole scenario came up, and we just had a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I was very transparent in saying I had no idea, and about an answer to something, and it came off as though she felt like she was accusing me of not being informed, and I was like, no, I'm genuinely, authentically quite comfortable not having that answer. Just don't worry, you're not offending me by pointing out that I don't know this. I truly don't. It doesn't mean I can't figure it out. But I find that curiosity and has helped me to build a lot of relationships and trust that can overcome a lot of that. So and then I learn and I grow, and I feel like, through the questions and going in deep and getting to know folks as well, that it creates that trust that we can learn together, that I can at some point demonstrate a level of value that really builds a long-term sustainable relationship. And so I find curiosity to be the core of being able to do that. and being open and transparent too. I'd really put those as key complements in my own style.
Yeah.
So that was one part. As I think about my own team, and as I think about recruiting, the only other thing I'd add to that, again coming into the psychology topic, Angela Duckworth wrote this book called Grit.
Yeah.
A huge fan of that, I gotta say. I love it. She tried to stay away from a formula of what does it mean to build talent and all of that, but I think she got there, which is it's
it's a great book. It's a
matter of effort, right? There's some latent talent, but skill comes through effort, and I think that applies so much. So what I look for is a lot of curiosity and a lot of grit, more so even than qualifications and skill, because I think a lot of things can learn if you would demonstrate those two characteristics. And I've had some great hires who haven't had a lot of experience, but have that kind of insatiable curiosity and willingness to work hard and persevere and really be open to, I'd say be open to failure as well, be open to accepting constructive feedback. So those things kind of complement the curiosity. And I think it's, and that's also, like I said, transcends into how I think about the hiring and the core things I'm looking for when I think about building the team for the future.
Wonderful. That's fascinating what you said there is about them being the basis of unlocking latent talent. And actually, I often find it people willing to go on that journey. It's quite an indicator whether they're willing to be curious, willing to realize what they don't have. So it's really interesting on that front. Now, obviously, you've just mentioned, we share a passion, and one of them you just mentioned about trying to make every interaction authentic and true, and also transparent about what we know and what we don't know. I think one of our others is about killing the use of acronyms. I could probably go on for quite a while about that, coming in the technology space and the payment space. But I wonder if you could share your lens on
that. Oh boy, I am immersed in 17 years at American Express, and it is incredibly easy to fall into that trap as well. And I've many years have had that on my goals to be in development plan. I would say is ensure you don't get sucked in. Oftentimes I think there's a mental model that I've really embraced as I think about acronyms and why they are a struggle. I think it sounds negative, but again, I think there's a lot of inherent laziness that sits behind it, and it's no critique of anyone. Like, it's just more human nature, right? I think we find shorthand ways that help us to move quickly through to getting to the same page. I think everyone has a good positive intent, and acronyms in certain groups can really help to just move through to the important content. So I think that's the basic idea of it. But what I find is that there's an assumption often that the people you're speaking to have a level of awareness and knowledge that you do on something. And being a leader in a team, I get this often. It is somebody on the team who's got 20 hours on a particular feature or product they're working on every week, and then I get a half hour a quarter with them. I'm not at all close to those details, and so acronyms actually they can impede transfer of knowledge and effectively absorbing content. And I think as soon as you start working across disciplines and functions, that becomes even more true. So if you go outside of the application experience and you're talking to somebody in the servicing world who's dealing with customer phone calls all the time, or you're speaking to somebody who's looking at, in my case, it's like upper funnel is like a different part of the customer journey, or the team in loyalty, or the team managing our AR platforms and dealing with interest rates and all that. Is even within a company, it's very easy to think that everybody might understand it, but the disconnect happens. And so what I see is, the reason I don't like it so much is is that it actually doesn't breed that connection and that
Right.
close common
Yeah.
understanding. The piece that I found that works really well to replace acronyms is, the talk. Can you tell your mom what you're doing
Yeah.
in your
Brilliant.
work, and does it pass that test? Or the guy at Starbucks, right? If you're on the corner in the queue to get your coffee, can you explain what you're doing in a way that person will understand?
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant.
And if you do, then you're probably in the right level. And so we use a couple of things that I really push in terms of specific, tangible advice. Is another book I've a big fan of is Working Backwards, Colin Breyer from Amazon exec at one point. But they've got a PRFAQ, or like a written narrative, and the entire concept is to find a way to orient around the customer and structure it. So a press release is very customer centric. It's very, I'll leave it at, it's very customer centric, and so it forces you to get away from acronyms. And so I think there are a few key tools that provide tangible ways of practicing how to do that, and that's what I try and work on with the team in particular. Is how do we use some tools, use some frameworks and references that provide good, objective, customer-centric ways of communicating, and I find that those types of documents provide really long-term value when it comes to bringing others along with you when you're pitching ideas, selling a roadmap, a strategy, or just coordinating delivery of a big complex thing.
Wonderful. No, I love the mum test there, or the Starbucks test. I think one of my proudest moments was when being able to explain what economies of scale actually was to my mum. It was one of those pivotal moments, I think. And she would very, very tell all her friends about some newfound knowledge about a son with economics. So no, it's a great test though. And I think the thing it does though, it makes you stop and think to communicate effectively to other people who might not know that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a number of books, and also you've mentioned your sort of hobby, mini hobby, probably very similar to mine as well, as of psychology, which I've compared lively sometime, John, is who has been the most influential though in you becoming the authentic leader you have today? Obviously, our environment and our experience and our upbringing have an impact, but who's been most authentic for you in shaping who you are today?
Oh, that's a wonderfully interesting question. I'm not convinced nobody springs to mind. And maybe it's because I think I'm on my 12th or 13th leader in my 17 years at Amex. And so I've had quite a broad set of direct leadership who I've worked for. But my head jumps into just colleagues that I've worked with as well, like people on my team. And I find some of those interactions, people who are content, in some cases, not with advancing, leadership. I don't know, people who advance and move up in an organization. There's I don't know, I would say a lot of common traits, I guess, in the level of ambition and aspiration associated with that. And I've learned a ton from those who've made successful careers advancing up through senior leaders. But equally, I think having an experience in Amex with I don't want to stereotype, but we've got a big footprint in Brighton and London, and I just found a lot of colleagues that I work with who are working to live versus living to work. And back to that analogy, I find that authentic way of work being a complement to life and being not the sole part of life has been hugely influential as I think about just happiness, joy, and fulfillment and in the day to day. And so I think that's been meaningful. And so I think in general, I would tout just being at American Express. I find that probably it's full of a lot of great people. Also why I've stayed here for 17 years. I found a lot of genuine interest in people, in the people that we tend to hire. And so I think that relationship, it's a very relationship oriented culture. And I think that of itself is somewhat permeated into a big part of how I've influenced me.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And I know that that's been at the heart of from what you have with your family, and the opportunity to say, actually, this is work is a component of life, but there's more to life. And actually, I know the holistic, very holistic view you and your wife take on bringing up children, etc. So that's I know that's a deep core value of yours as well in the interactions we've had and we've discussed, because it's similar for me too. So going back to your sort of, this is the 21-year-old question here now, Joel. Now you're sort of older and wiser. What would you be advising your 21-year-old self that you know today that you would advise them back then?
I do like that one too. One of the things that I'm doing right now is trying to grow our presence with recruiting talent straight out of school. So it was my favorite question for a grad, a set of campus recruits that I had that had come in as well. It was exactly that. What advice do you give to us who are just starting out our career? It's like a commencement speech at Stanford or something. My advice is maybe it's just being in a big enterprise. One of the things that I've learned over time is, for me, which is a bit of a struggle, I think I was very ambitious in driving results and making an impact. That has been pervasive. And the advice I would give is that oftentimes results are done in a collaborative partnership with others. And it's really important to know who the stakeholders and partners are who have either experience or a strong will and interest in something. And if you don't know who those players are, you're in real trouble. And so I think my advice is as you come into a career is figure out who the decision makers are. Figure out who's keen to be involved and be interested. And make sure to connect with them early. In whatever particular project or role that you've got, and check in with them. So I think if you don't, the best solutions can get squashed, and it oftentimes is framed up as politics. But I think if I think about one of my major failures was not taking this into account when I joined American Express. I spent 6 months doing what I thought was amazing work to come up with some solutions to solve some problems, speaking with lots of people, but I missed a couple key people in understanding their role and responsibility, and it felt like I was going behind their back. And undermining their credibility with some of their partners. And so I missed out on that. And I think it's continued, like that learning in of itself has been invaluable, as it has certainly been a presence in going forward in pretty much every role since. But I think that would be my advice. Look out for those things, the people that are important, and build a relationship with them and understand their needs and interests, and before you go off and solve their problems.
Wonderful. Well, Joel, this is the point in the show where I normally try and sort of collate sort of 2 or 3 key pieces of insight, etc. But I'm sat in front of 2 pages of notes, so I just wonder if I could just summarize the insights we've gained today, and perhaps share those what I've heard. I think first of all, the value of challenging assumptions, and whether that's asking for what purpose or going on 5 whys and saying what's our North Star? What are we trying to achieve here? It's usually, and starting with the customer is probably directionally pretty good as a place to do that. And then taking a short amount of time back to then sprint to actually move quicker by taking a bit of step back. I like this as well about trying to get every interaction as authentically showing up as you. And actually it's not a weakness to say that you can't do something, but actually if you lead with curiosity, you're probably going to build trust more, you're going to build better relationships, and you're actually going to pull people towards you more. I really like what you were saying as well about how you go about recruiting, which is leading with curiosity, but that's closely defined to trying to untap latent talent. And you sort of having those twin pillars of curiosity and grit are actually highly prized in your teams, because it's more likely in a collaborative perspective you're going to be able to move together. Interesting what you're saying about acronyms being a potentially impediment to learning and actually sharing of knowledge and sharing of learning across a complex organization. And then also about, I suppose, living, about making sure that we're living a life that's actually on our terms, and actually work is a component of that, a potentially fulfilling component of that, and a challenging component, but not the whole component. And just making sure that there's more to that, because also I know that that's something we show our children as well, about how we show up in the world. And then I really love the last part then, where you just said, actually, be aware of not just the pure ambition to drive results, but actually take a slightly wider lens, saying, what's the context here? Who are the decision makers? Who are the people, the stakeholders who you do need to engage with, and engage early, because engaging early is likely, again, to build trust, to build a relationship, and ultimately share collaborative results and get more people involved, and appreciation's likely to go up. That they're the sense of what I heard from you today. Is that a fair reflection?
It sounds brilliant. I wish I could have said it so concisely.
Joe, I've got the easy job. You got all the insights. I just summarize. I've got the easy job. Okay.
No, but you did very, very, very well. Those all sound great. I'll take those notes back.
Wonderful. Well, look, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you very much indeed for your insights and your, I know how you lead with curiosity and collaborative approach to deal with complex things. So thank you very much indeed.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Adrian, and look forward to connecting with you again sometime soon, I hope.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe.
Take care. Bye.